What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining us on another edition of our Aggie Sports Zoom Hangout as we go around with media types around the country, and especially guys that we have a good connection with. And Cease, I'll let you – well, I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle here in the Eagle newsroom over – I think here, but depending on which way you're watching this video, he might be over here. I don't know. On the same level, that's Robert Cessna, sports editor here at the Eagle. Cease, I'll let you introduce our two guests for today.
Yeah, you always want to get people that can carry you, and these guys have carried me for a long time going back. Wow, I hate to say it. They might say it. I forgot to ask, I hope I don't owe them any money from trips or anything, whatever. But so glad to have John Warner of the the Waco Tribune and Brice Cherry. These guys covered softball games, football games, basketball games. Not so much baseball because between Larry and whatever, so I wasn't going to get out there much. But two of my favorite guys from the old days and still the current days because we're owned by the same company. Good to see you guys. I saw Brice not recently at the Texas Sports Hall of Fame committee meeting, but always good to see you guys. Thanks for doing this, guys.
Sure thing, absolutely. Yeah. Always good to get together with you guys. We miss not seeing you as much. I mean, obviously with A&M in the SEC, you know, we used to cross paths quite a bit, but less so nowadays.
I would have crossed paths with you more when I was up at the Star-Telegram with everything going on there, but I was not introduced to y'all at the time. So pleasure to get to chat with you again now. Again, y'all up the road, covering Baylor, covering everything, Waco. How has the COVID-19 pandemic, everything shut down, how has that kind of affected and worked around Baylor athletics? And what is the future, the next couple months looking like from the officials that y'all are talking to around that issue?
John, I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, okay. Obviously it's been a little awkward. Dave Aranda just got there in January. He quickly put together his staff. They were all ready to go for spring training, and then the virus hit. And I think it's been a pretty tough transition just because all the players had to leave campus. They've done a lot of virtual meetings like everybody else has. And we'll see how it goes. They're finally going to get to do some individual workouts beginning Monday. They're starting to bring some players back to campus for like strength and conditioning kind of stuff. And hopefully they'll have spring or preseason drills beginning in August. We'll see how that goes. But, a first-year coach, I think he really could have benefited from spring practice. But nobody else got to do spring practice either. So it'll be interesting how it all works out. That's for like spring.
Hey guys, I'm always interested about Baylor. A lot of good pub the last few years by Matt Rule. It's hard not to be in the outside looking in when you looked at coaches across the country. That from my standpoint, a lot of people say, man, you talk about overachievers. He walked into a bad situation and made it a great situation very quickly. So I'm wondering about the hangover or, how does Randa move forward from that? And I'm sure you guys have written about it and talked about it on and off the record, so to speak. But, man, Matt Rule was impressive. I'm flipping the dial and he was talking. I listened to see what he said because I knew recruits was listing him. So how's Aranda going to continue that?
I think that's a great question, Cease. That's the $1 million question because Matt Rule did do an amazing job here. He was here a short time, and I know there is a faction of Baylor fans who are a little resentful of the fact that, he was here such a short time. But at the same time, I don't know how you can't be happy about the job that he did at Baylor, turning the program around, cleaning it up. Obviously, it was a very negative situation when he stepped into it. And a lot of coaches would not have stepped into that situation. I think, Baylor fans are going to have to be patient. with Dave Aranda. Baylor's coming off an 11-win season, Sugar Bowl trip. This is going to be a new staff, a new system. He hasn't had time to put it in. They're replacing a ton of defensive guys. And so, you're going to have to give him time. But at the same time, he's very different from Matt Rule in terms of, Cease, you mentioned it. Matt Rule is kind of a preacher, You start, getting fired up. You're ready to run through a wall. And Aranda's much more subdued, much more thoughtful and introspective, and it's a polar opposite kind of deal. I think he's very intelligent, and obviously a defensive guy, so that worked well for Baylor last year. That was the strength of that team last year, was the defense.
Yeah, I'll add that Coach Aranda is a lot easier to transcribe on tape. Matt,
Hey,
5 minutes. It'd take you half an hour to transcribe. He talks so fast.
we have to deal with Jimbo Fisher. I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah, I've heard stories.
Oh my gosh.
But no, Brice hit it on the head. Dave is very thoughtful. He's very measured in what he says. You can almost kind of see the wheels turning in his head before he says something. But I think he's going to do a really good job here. He got a couple of really good coordinators. Larry Fedora, who was a head coach at North Carolina. He had actually been here in the 90s under Coach Taff and Coach Reedy. So he's got, even though this is Coach Aranda's first head coaching job, he's got coordinators with head coaching experience. Ron Roberts is a defensive coordinator. He's another guy who's been around a long time, head coaching, defensive coordinator experience, obviously. I think he will rely on both of those guys a whole lot just to kind of help him work through some things as far as becoming a head coach. And it's going to be interesting, though. The good thing for Baylor, I believe they have 7 offensive starters back, led by Charlie Brewer. He's got some really good receivers. Josh Fleeks, Tyquan Thornton are 2 really good ones. He's got some good backs. And like Brice mentioned, the defense is really going to be a rebuilding project. They've got 2 guys back, but they've got a really good leader, linebacker Terrell Bernard. He was an all Big 12 player. He stepped in for Clay Johnston at middle linebacker after Clay went down with a knee injury at midseason last year, and just did an unbelievable job. I think he played at definitely all Big 12 level, maybe even I think he should have gotten some All-America mention because he really became a leader of that defense. So, but their defense does have a lot of guys who've played. They just haven't started.
What about you look at A&M and even the national people, this is a year where Jimbo needs to win 10 games. What would be a good season for Aranda's first? Is there a win total, or what would you guys think if he does this, finishes third in a competitive Big 12, or what's it going to take for people to say, hey man, we're on the right way, we're going the right way?
I personally think if Baylor was back in a bowl game, whatever bowl game it was, I think that would be acceptable. I mean, the other thing we didn't mention is the schedule breaks against Baylor, the other direction this year. Last year, OU and Texas came to Waco. This year, Baylor goes there. And so the schedule's a lot tougher. We already mentioned the personnel differences and the new coach and the new system. So, to me, if they win 6 or 7 games, I think that's a perfectly fine start, and even if they win less, again, to me, whenever you're judging a new coach, I think you got to give them to year 3 before you really know what they're doing, or who they are, because you got to give them time to get their guys in there, install their system and all that. And we saw what Baylor did under year 3 of Matt Rule. So,
A slightly
Yeah.
self-serving question for you. When I was covering high schools up in DFW, one of my favorite guys was Joey McGuire at Cedar Hill. Now, of course, he's there at Baylor, interim head coach there when Matt Rule left. How important was it for him to stay on the coaching staff and provide some of that continuity with Dave Aranda when he came on? And what does he kind of mean to the players that are still there?
Yeah, that was a real priority to keep him there. In fact, a lot of the players wanted him to be the head coach. I mean, he's that well liked among the players and that well respected. Yeah, he's obviously a great recruiter, a great people person, and he'll be coaching the outside linebackers this year. But yeah, they kept him and Sean Bell, and they kept a David Wetzel, who's in an off the field position. All those guys are former Texas high school coaches. They really know the turf really well. They know all the coaches in the state. And it was very important to keep that connection with all those guys staying on staff.
Do you see him as a guy that might be the next hot coordinator move, or do you see him as a Baylor guy, Baylor lifer?
It's hard to tell. I know he likes it here, but yeah, I think he would need to probably be a coordinator somewhere. So I don't know if he saw a position that he might like, as maybe a step toward becoming a head coach. I think he will be a head coach at the college level someday, but yeah, I think he probably needs a coordinator experience, and whether that's at Baylor or somewhere else, I don't know.
I'll interject and say that I think if he had gotten the head coaching position, I think he would have been here a while. In terms of, if they'd had success and they performed up to, how he thought they would. I think Joey's a Texan and a guy that would have looked at Baylor as a place he could have, built some roots.
Yeah.
Guys, when I thought about when one of you were talking about Aranda, it dawned on me it wasn't that long ago where Baylor was last one year in the in the Big 12, and there was like nobody at the football media days except a handful of people. And my point being is, you changed ads, you changed football coaches. I mean, what Browse when it came in, and there's a negative, but he was able to win. My point being is, it seems like Baylor in the last 10 years is really a major player in everything. So what's happened in Waco for Baylor? We always know what Monkey did. And, man, you look at the men's basketball, you look at baseball, they went out and hired a top-notch coach. Just overall, you change ADs, you change football coaches, and you guys are expected to be top 20 in everything. And you guys have lived through it. So what's changed for Baylor athletics and just Baylor University possibly?
Yeah, go ahead, Brice.
Well, I do think Mac Rhodes has done an amazing job. We already, referenced the scandal that Baylor went through, and those were dark times, not just for the football program, but the university, as a whole. And it touched every, I think, athletic department. When Mac came in, they revamped, everything they were doing in terms of Title IX. And so they've cleaned up a lot of things. As far as the athletic success goes, I think, they have hit home runs on some of their coaching hires. I think Baylor has a niche in terms of it being a private school in the Big 12. Obviously, TCU falls into that category too, but a Christian environment, I think that speaks to recruits. But I just think they really have got a pretty good collection of head coaches across the board right now, and that's led to a lot of success in a lot of different sports.
Yeah, I'll add, they've got incredible facilities too. Yeah. And they're really impressive sitting along the Brazos River. I mean, I've seen a lot of facilities, obviously been to a lot of different places, but I really can't, excuse me, I really can't think of one that looks better than Baylor's. just the way they all sit there on the river. And a lot of them are new too. So, they got that going for them. And I will say, and like Brice mentioned, they've made some incredible hires. They've rarely missed on coaching hires really in the last couple of decades. Nobody around here really knew who Matt Rule was when Mac Rhodes hired him. In fact, everybody always says, well, who are they going to hire? So you put a list together. Nobody had Matt Rule on there. And really it was like until like 2 days before he hired, before his name actually even came up in the media. So, that was an amazing hire. And, I think they feel really good about Coach Aranda too.
I'll take a moment here real quick throw out there. Thanks for everyone who's watching on Facebook and Periscope. If y'all have any questions for any of us, anything about Baylor or A&M or sports related, go ahead and fire those in there. I'll cut you off, Cease. Just one. You have an A&M question that we can get to real quick between you and me. Levi Henshaw on Facebook asks, what is the starting wide receiver prospectus for the starting the first game this season as against LSU? And I'll just go ahead and throw out there. I think, of course you have Jamon Osmond as a guy who is going to come back and be the leader of that wide receiver group, but it's going to be a young group. You have Moose Muhammad, you have Demon Demas, who's shown incredible athleticism on Twitter coming in as freshman, who could easily step up and start. Cease, who am I missing on the, because I know you have Courtney Davis, Kendrick Rogers, and
wasn't expecting A&M football questions.
I know, right?
Like, wow.
Yeah. So I think the answer to that question is it's going to be a young group, but I think it's going to be a pretty talented group because they got some guys who, if you put any stock into the Starsies from the recruiting sites, that are going to step up and probably see some significant playing time. But then you also have to look at the tight ends too, with Baylor Cupp and Jaden Weidermeyer as going to be huge receiving threats too. And so you might see more, 21, 20, 22 packages out there. So anyway, thanks everyone for putting in your comments. If you have any more comments, questions, A&M, Baylor related, throw those out there. We'll get to them. See,
Travis,
next question. Yeah.
So A&M has a receiver named Baylor Cupp.
They do.
Wow. Okay.
That'd
be like Baylor having a guy named Aggie.
I like that.
Aggie Jockstrap or something.
There you go.
He's a sophomore, or going to be a redshirt freshman tight end out of Brock.
See, I got that question right. Hey, way to go.
Yeah, there you go. So
when you mentioned facilities, I would laugh because Brett Zorneman, our good buddy from the Chronicle, we leave the conference, you get a nice football stadium, and we don't get a chance to see it yet.
I know.
Same lines, is Baylor getting a new basketball arena? Because I wonder with Texas getting a new arena and with Mulkey just ruling that conference for now a decade, but with Vic Schaefer coming in, what do you think about that dynamic?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as the new arena, they haven't set a date yet for groundbreaking. They're still raising money for it. Obviously, this pandemic has put that behind a little bit. But yeah, it's going to come someday. It's going to be a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
They want to create more of a home court advantage. So I think it's only going to be like 7,000 seats, something like that. It's going to be a field house style arena. It'll probably look pretty darn good. Why don't you answer the Vic Schaefer question, Brice?
I think that was a great hire by Texas, and I've written about it before, but in terms of women's basketball in the Big 12, it's been Baylor and everybody else. Everybody else are the Lilliputians because Baylor just dominates this conference. I can't even keep up with how many conference titles in a row they've won now. It's like 13 or something like that. I may be wrong, but it's a bunch. Might be 14. But so Baylor needs a rival, and Texas has kind of like flirted with that a little bit. They had some decent teams under Karen Aston, but I think they also underachieved a lot, and they could never beat Baylor, really. I mean, I think they might have beaten them once. So, Vic Schaefer comes in. We know what he can do, and I think it's a good hire. And I think, it only helps the conference if somebody steps up, and really it probably could only help Baylor too if they have a legit rival like they had with A&M when Gary's team was in the Big 12. Those were some epic games.
Right.
And, and I think that they've been missing that since A&M left.
It's really not unlike the SEC West with just hiring guys who can beat Nick Saban. Pretty similar situation. Also, going back, I think I'm going to go home later tonight and fire up the NCAA 14 game and create a player named Aggie Jockstrap. I think
yes, absolutely.
That is exactly what I need to do. When you look at all of and we talked about a little bit the financial ramifications of the pandemic and what that's going to mean for sports that aren't called football. Do you see a more regionalization of scheduling probably for the Olympic sports and even basketball and baseball and softball? Will there maybe be more trips between Waco and College Station or some of these other Texas schools that some of these schools won't normally play in non-conference?
Well, I tell you, I would love to see that, especially Baylor A&M. I mean, that was always such a great rivalry for such a long time. They played in a few sports, obviously, I guess basketball, softball regionals. Have they played in baseball, Brice?
Yes, it's been, I think, at the Houston College Classic.
Yes,
yeah,
it was the walk-off grand slam.
Yes, Tucker Cascadden. That was a big moment for Baylor. But
yeah, but
I'd love to see it in women's basketball.
Oh,
yeah.
We know Kim, maybe not so much. I mean, she has been on record as saying that that is unlikely to happen.
Yeah, because
the
challenge would have done it if they could.
Oh yeah.
She put that a much different way, though.
She did. She compared it to having an affair, and if you if you're married to somebody and that person goes off and messes around and then they want to come back, the answer is no. That's what Kim would say.
And she hasn't wavered on that, because you're right, with A&M being so good, not to the caliber of Baylor, but still a top 20 team almost every year. What a great home-and-home series that would be to have back-to-back years. And because at the end, like you said, those were just great games. And then when A&M got in the SEC, I said, well, they'll play in the NCAA tournament like all the time. And so far, not a one. A&M didn't uphold their situation a couple of times, but zero. They've met 0 times.
Well, and you want to talk about one of the shames of the pandemic and the way things ended and the way that there wasn't really NCAA tournament. This seemed like a season where if A&M could hold up their end of the bargain, they were destined for a regional meetup in Dallas potentially, which would have been just all the cards on the table. Great.
That would have been cool. Yeah.
And while we're
that would have been great. And Baylor fans have some bad memories about playing A&M in Dallas and women's
basketball. Don't go there, Brice.
I'm not going there.
And while we're talking about women's basketball, and I know you've written it that she should have been in before, but what about when you have a coach that's in the overall Basketball Hall of Fame? That was quite a coup for Kim, considering she's still very young in, quote, her career as far as how far she's got to go.
To me, it was inevitable. What she's done as a player, what she's done as a coach. I think there were a lot of people that were like, why isn't she in? Why isn't she in? And I do think that, maybe some of the things that she had said in the last few years that, comments she had made may have worked against her in voting. But see, you and I are on the Texas Sports Hall of Fame committee together. Sometimes it just takes time for these people to get in. All the candidates are good and worthy, and you have an abundance of them. And, you know, I've personally been trying to get Sophia Young in the Texas Sports Hall of Fame for
Yes,
the
you
last
have.
6 years or something, and it just takes time. And so, like I said, I think it was inevitable that Mulkey was going to get in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And once she got that third national title as a coach, I mean, how could you keep her out? You know, so we'll find out, I guess, if they have the ceremony this year. It looks like they may end up postponing it till next year, but
She's a lot milder to cover these days, I'm sure, Brice. She hasn't called you out in the middle of a press conference lately, I'm assuming.
don't first of all, don't throw down the gauntlet to her. And I don't know that I would ever call Kim mild. Milder, maybe.
I do miss covering her. When people ask, I said, you know, she kept you on your toes because she knew what you wrote or what you didn't, and if you said something you shouldn't, you were going to hear about it, and that's the way it should be.
Lord knows she reads everything.
Yeah. Hey, so on a lot of these Zoom hangouts that we've done in the past, when we've had such great journalistic talent and history on, it's always, you know, we're looking for stuff in the paper, and nostalgia has been what's kind of sold lately. What is some of y'all's favorite Baylor A&M athletic memories throughout the years for all three of y'all?
Well, I'll say the 2006 game. Baylor was not football. Baylor was not very good. They were getting a little better under Guy Morris, but Baylor rallied. Sean Bell threw a touchdown pass to Dominique Ziegler right at the end of the game, and then hit the 2-pointers, same two guys, and Baylor pulled it off. And that's that might be the best Baylor A&M game that I've seen. But yeah, I'll go with that.
Well, don't you have to also bring up the however many overtime basketball game?
Yeah, 5. Yeah, 5 over. Yeah, that was a great one too. Except I was thinking more about deadline there than how great that game was.
Yeah, that was brutal.
What about you, Brice?
Gosh, John stole a good one there. There were so many of the Gary versus Kim games that I thought were incredible. I still have a vivid memory of being over in College Station and covering a Baylor A&M women's game, and crowd was just insane. Both teams were highly ranked, and I'll never forget Morgan Medlock for Baylor went around her back and made a layup, and it was just a really sweet move. And I think that might have been when A&M had Danielle Adams, and she was fun to watch. And so some of those battles there come to mind. I'll also never forget, I don't know if this is a highlight or not, but I'll never forget Art Briles asking to Larry, saying, where are you from? Is that an A&M question?
That's an A&M question. How could you not forget that? You're right. I mean, that was just like, wow.
Yeah. Baylor had just gotten waxed by A&M, and so he was not in the best of moods. Normally, Art was not like that after a game, but he was not happy.
Yeah, because Griffin, Sherman had said something to Robert Griffin, and Larry asked, what did he tell you? And that's when Art goes in and goes, who are you from? Is that an A&M question? And he goes to Robert Griffin, you don't have to answer that. And it's like, whoa, hey.
And Robert was more than happy to answer it. He was always really good with the media. So
yeah, I will say if there's one guy who could handle any question from the media very well, it's Robert.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys said. The game for A&M to go to the Final Four, finally get over the hump, beat Mulkey in that game. That was amazing. The overtime game that John talked about, Ziegler, of course, gone to Clean Harker Heights playing for Ross. I mean, just the way that game went. That game to me meant so much for Baylor, and after all those years, finally to beat A&M. You could sense just the electricity even in the press box because, most people are for the home team, and for them to win was amazing. Now, what's funny is a side note, 2 years later when A&M goes up there, it's, if I remember right, it was a game. And Baylor had a chance to win when they went back up there. And I want to say it was in the fourth quarter, third quarter, A&M makes a big play, and it's a pass play. It just involves me because it's late, and we're down there on the sidelines getting ready, and A&M makes a big pass. And just, I forget who caught the ball, but it was a big play. And Franchione turned, and he caught my eyesight, and he winked at me. And I'm thinking, like, you know, you got to win this game or you might get run out of town. And you're just so happy about that. You wink at a sports writer, you know, like, but, you know, it's little things like that that people don't realize make our job when you're doing something like this. And it also proves that sometimes we put all these people up on pedestals, the way we write, the way we talk about them, and we're trying to mention how human Mulkey is. Well, Franchione was human in that moment. He just, you know, he knew that was, he had to feel relieved that A&M was going to win the game, and he winked at me. You know, I mean, that's the first person he saw was me, and you can't make that stuff up. And that's why we're in this business. As I led off with, I got a lot of good memories sent with you guys. John and I set out the Aggie softball complex baking in the sun one year in the regional softball tournament or whatever. You know, I mean, those things is what we're in the business for.
I haven't come on this beat after the move to the Big 12. I don't have any A&M Baylor memories, but I will say that I was there for 61-58, and I am a TCU alum. So I was covering that game, and that was the only thing you remember about that game is I think it took 3 days. Like I legitimately think the game took 3 days to play. So this leads me into another segue because we're going to go down nostalgia lane here a little bit. And this is, again, a little bit selfishly because I know y'all have known him for a while. You've got to give me your favorite Robert Cessna story.
Oh, wow.
That you can say in public, you know.
John's got a good one, don't you? Driving with him?
Yeah,
it's a Jerry Hill related story.
Was that in Kansas City, I think?
Kansas City with Jerry Hill.
Big 12 media days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't you run over a bunch of cones or something?
Well, I came close to running them over. We're on, was it Interstate 35 or 45? We're going to get a Royals game one night at the end. And it's Scott Clendenin, myself, Jerry Hill, and probably I think Richard Kroom probably at that time.
Okay.
And, you know, Cease was going usual down the road, 75, 80, and on the far left-hand lane, and all of a sudden they go, hey, that was our exit, and I made it our exit, needless to say. Didn't hit any cones. Yeah, so I came real close to the cement, everything, you know, and Jerry's, you know, 8 shades white. Scott Clendenin and Kroom are normal. That's just normal driving for Cease. And I swear for 2 years later when I saw Jerry Hill, he would just start trembling. And he goes, I'm never getting in a car with you. I'm never getting in a car with you. And then
Jim Wilson's the same way.
And then I find out a couple years later, he's in a wreck with Warner down at the Hempstead Inn. And I'm saying, like, hey, I didn't even scratch anything.
Yeah, they ended up upside down.
Upside down.
And we got to the game. It was a great game. Free tickets from Bo Carter. You couldn't beat it. But Jerry Hill just kept shaking throughout the whole game.
So Jerry hasn't driven with you since, right?
Oh, I know he hasn't. He won't even sit close to me. I guess he's afraid I might knock him out and put him in the car.
And Jim Wilson hasn't driven with you in a while.
Well, yeah, Jim Wilson a long time ago. He is now the publisher up at Waco. He's at the Eagle. He's retiring now, and so he lived to tell about it. But when he was down here, just an ad salesman, he played some softball, went out, you know, had a few Cokes, you know, whatever. So, yeah, he saw me firsthand. A lot of people get scared of my driving.
I can vouch for that.
Here once, and like it's part of its leg like stuck in the door.
The legend is moving on.
The deer was underneath the car. I ran over a dead deer. Come on.
The best part about that story, so we're coming back from Tuscaloosa. We hit a deer. We just don't know what happened. The next day, I'm in a car behind that car, and we see this thing hanging down. So we pull over in a gas station. There's a deer leg hanging off, we come to find. And so we're like, what do we do with this literal full deer leg attached to the bottom of the car? And so we're like, do we knock it off? Or what's going on? This guy, we're in rural Mississippi. This guy who's pumping his gas next to us, just
no teeth.
A nice Mississippi native goes, hey, what you boys gonna do with that?
That was supper for him, baby.
Oh man, Roadkill Cafe.
Yeah. So
the deer was already dead.
Yes, well, it is.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Because those guys are sleeping, and I hit it at about 80. It's like, I go, what did we hit?
In a Chevy Impala. And
I go, it was a dead deer. I couldn't miss it. I said, if I missed it, we'd be on a ditch dead. I just ran over it.
So moving on with the nostalgia factor, my last question to this, and something that I've asked every reporter that we've had on here. We have some great journalistic experience in this the Zoom hangout right now. What is one of your favorite memories, favorite stories, favorite players you've interviewed? When you kind of think back on your career to date, and you kind of have one of those highlight moments or interviews or moments, something funny, something sentimental, something amazing. What is kind of one of the first one or two things that pops up in your head?
Wow. I'll go first because John's got longer to think, more years to think about. But I think, Cease hit on it in terms of the personal connections that you make with coaches, athletes, people that you do stories on. I personally, we've gotten a chance over the years to cover some really cool things, to interview some really cool athletes. Texas Sports Hall of Fame is right here in Waco, so the big names come here every year, and we get that chance to meet them. But for me, it's always been about, the stories that are more of the unsung people, or just, local folks that may do something great athletically, or just have a unique, human interest type story. And there's been a lot of those over the years. But in terms of, you mentioned, who's a great interview. I mean, we already mentioned it once, but Robert Griffin goes down as an all-timer in terms of an interview. And I can remember first talking to him when he was a freshman at Coppers Cove High School. And back then, our circulation area, Cease can probably, understand this. It was bigger back then. And we actually covered Cove. And so it was at a track meet, and he, of course, was amazing in track. He just blistered through the hurdles, and I went to talk to him after the meet. And like I said, he's a freshman, so, 13, 14 years old, I guess. And he could not have been more well-spoken or polished or, intelligent. And I was just like, this kid's a freshman. I didn't know where my classes were when I was a freshman. And he was just like very, very, you could see the military background there from his parents. And so we used to, when he was at Baylor, back then they did interviews a little differently. We kind of missed those days, but he would do each of the TV networks in town. He would do a one-on-one interview with them. He would do the radio. He might do some phoners, for out-of-town media. And then at the very end, they would put him with the print guys. And they called that the Shark Tank, because we're so vicious, I guess. And he had us eating out of his hand, and we loved the Shark Tank because we always got the most time with him. I'll never forget him talking about his proposal to his then fiance. He did this elaborate thing where he had her come into the practice facility, and that was crazy. And one time he showed up for interviews at Halloween in like a Jason mask. and he was going around campus with like a knife and scaring people. Robert was fun to cover, to say the least.
Yeah, he was a pretty good football player too.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, actually, I talked to him a couple weeks ago. He was obviously offensive player of the decade for Baylor. We did all decade teams for all their sports. Plus, he's going into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame this year. I'd like to add a funny recent one with an A&M connection. Anyway, Tony Franklin went into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. Anyway, so I was trying to find any teammates he was with. So it turned out Mike Renfro, who played for TCU and later NFL with the Oilers and such, he was his high school teammate. So Mike has been wanting to get into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. And he was, well, let's just say a little upset that a kicker got there before him. Not only that, a kicker he played with in high school. And not only that, but Tony claimed that he was like a second team all-district safety in high school. So Mike did not believe that. So he went back and checked with another teammate, and he texted me back and said, Tony was not a second team all-district safety in high school. So anyway, but you know, now Shane Leckler is getting into the Hall of Fame this year. And I told Brice he should call Mike, get his reaction on that. Since it would be like a kicker and a punter getting in front of him.
Mike is on the ballot again, and so hopefully, you know, he makes it in.
That's too funny.
Oh, I would like to correct something from before. That was a 2004 Baylor A&M game where
Okay.
Ziegler made the catch. Yeah.
Awesome.
We all remember it though. Trust me. Yeah.
Well, you're talking Robert Griffin. I know they kind of made a little bit of news in the last couple of weeks about saying that he still wants to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, and he's seeing guys at 40 who are doing it, and he thinks he can do it. Is that something that you think could still be in the cards for him, or what's y'all's take on Robert Griffin's kind of roller coaster NFL career?
Well, you know, like I said, I talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he said he's healthier than he's been probably since he's been in the NFL. You know, obviously it probably helps. He hadn't played a whole lot either. So he's gotten a chance to get healthy. And yeah, he really believes he can do it if he gets to the right situation. I think a lot of people didn't think he'd be back in the NFL even as a backup. But yeah, so he's hopeful. You know, we'll see. It would have to be the right situation, and he would have to prove again that he can stay healthy. And, you know, he'd probably have to be more of a pocket guy instead of scrambling a lot, because, you know, that's the way he got hurt before. He was a, you know, real mobile guy who got out of the pocket a lot. So, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, it can happen. I mean, he's healthy. You know, I think he still has the physical tools.
I've never seen a more confident guy. Robert, whenever you asked him about the other team and, oh, you know, how did they defend y'all on this? And, you know, it seemed like they really took that away. It was never about what they did well. It was always about what Baylor or we didn't do right or whatever. Robert refused to give any credit to the other team. I'll just say, I think if Robert wanted to quit the NFL tomorrow and make a run at the Olympics in hurdling, honestly, I think he could do it. I always felt like he was a better track athlete than he was a football player, and he was pretty dadgum good as a football player. But I mean, he was in high school as a junior at Cove. He was like a 10th of a second or 100th of a second away from setting a national record in the hurdles. Of course, he won state easily. And then as a 17 or 18-year-old, he should have been a senior at Cove. He graduated a semester early in December, but he was going through spring football for Baylor. and then decided to come out and do track. And in his first meet, he ran, I can't remember the time, but it was really good time. But he got second to a guy at Baylor who was a really good hurdler. And he was so pissed. I mean, he was just so pissed. And Todd Harbor's like, Robert, you've been out here for 3 days. Well, he goes on to win the Big 12, beat that other good hurdler at Baylor, and finish third in the NCAA at the NCAA meet. As a freaking 18-year-old, he should have been going to his senior prom. So yeah, he was an incredible athlete and incredibly confident, and he lived up to it.
Well, guys, Cease, you got anything else for these guys?
Oh, it was great. Time flew by like always, man. I really enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah, great seeing you all
Got a
again.
lot of good
Yeah,
memories.
thanks for having us.
Time flew by like Cease is driving.
I'll,
Maybe
I'll
not
dri-
quite
I'll
that
dri-
fast.
I'll drive a copy up of this to you so you guys can have it.
Well, thanks so much for Brice and John joining us this week on the Zoom Hangout. Stay safe up there, and you can check out all their work at the Waco Tribune. What is it? Wait, is it? What's
WacoTrib.com.
WacoTrib.com. There you go. Do y'all do the tweeters? Do y'all have Twitters you want to
Yes.
pedal?
Mine is at Brice Cherry.
Yeah, John Warner Trib.
There you go. There you
It
go.
used to be WTH, but somebody who saw it goes, "What the hell?" I changed it to Trib.
That's great. That's great. Anyways, thanks guys for joining us, and I'm sure we'll get to hang out with y'all and see y'all here pretty soon. Thanks everyone for watching on Facebook Live and on theeagle.com, and we'll be sure to have another one of these coming up soon.